Hi Year 10s, welcome to our video on biodiversity. This is going to be the week 7 content for ecosystems, or for the trimester in biology. So let's jump straight in, starting with a need to know. So I won't focus too much time on here. If you want to read these or write these down in your book, you can pause the video at this point and take them down. But these are just at the end of this PowerPoint. These are the link or the content that you should be able to do for the trimester exam that's coming up in a few weeks. We're going to start with biodiversity. What is biodiversity? So biodiversity is just a shortened term for biological diversity, and that means roughly how much variety is there of life on Earth. There's 3 different components to biodiversity that we need to know: species diversity, habitat diversity, and genetic diversity. Before we start talking about those 3, though, it's important to think about biodiversity as a whole. And does biodiversity actually differ across the entire world? And the answer is no. Yes, it does differ across the world. It's not the same all across the world. It's not constant. It depends on the time that you're looking at a certain area. It depends at where the ecosystem is. Lots of different matters. Areas with higher biodiversity have fewer limiting factors, so fewer things that limit animals from growing and the populations from growing. So therefore, areas, as we can see on this graph here, along the equator, have the highest relative biodiversity. They've got the purple and the red zones there. They have the highest biodiversity, and the reason for that is areas along the equator have the highest rainfall. They have good temperatures. That allows for higher or increased plant growth. With increased plant growth, that's more habitats for animals. More habitats for animals means more food, more shelter, decreases the amount of competition, and increases the number of species that can survive. So anywhere that's got high rainfall and good temperatures, which leads to increased plant growth, means there's a higher level of biodiversity in general. So that's why the equator has such higher levels of biodiversity, because it has those conditions. Whereas you move down low, like looking in Antarctica, etc., there's no biodiversity there. The biodiversity is incredibly low because there's not good temperatures, there's not good rainfall, there's high limiting factors, which means that animals just can't survive. Looking at that a little bit more in detail, so we've got 2 different biomes, which are basically ecosystem areas. We have a tropical rainforest in the Amazon, and we have cold deserts. Now, the biodiversity is high in the tropical rainforest, but it's low in the cold desert. When we look at that a little bit more, the rainforest has temperatures ranging from 30 to 34. The lowest is 30 and the highest is 34. Whereas the range in the cold deserts is, in winter, it's negative 30, and in summer, it's positive 10. So there's a range of 40 compared to a range of 4. Okay, so these temperatures are much more forgiving in the rainforest and allow more life to survive. And we're looking at rain, 250 mils in the rainforest compared to 15 to 25 in a cold desert. So again, much more rainfall, providing water for the plants to grow. So rainforests generally a much better type of ecosystem. There is a video here called "Why is Biodiversity Important?" I will link this below this video, so you will need to watch this. This is important. I will link this below the video that you're watching now on Doing Science Right. Please make sure you watch this as well. I won't play it now, mainly because it will be playing my copyright on YouTube, so I won't play that there. But as you can see, what is biodiversity and why is it important? That's the video by the CSIRO. That'll be linked below. 7 minutes. Give that a watch. You don't need to take notes from that, but just watch that. Going on to the benefits of biodiversity. So humans benefit from biodiversity in a number of ways. One is they benefit financially by extracting goods that can be processed or sold, such as timber, food, and medicines. There's increased biodiversity, gives us cleaner air, better balance of atmospheric gases, water cycle, climate regulation. It provides playgrounds for people to escape the city life. It helps to maintain genetic diversity. It allows us to have certain biomes that we know little about, so again, such as the Arctic areas, that we can do research on and learn more about them. But the most important one, I suppose, is that we're all part of the web of life, and the way we are now and how we've got to is because of nature itself. We've survived off of nature, and we benefit off nature. And if we damage nature and prevent them from proceeding themselves, then we may suffer consequences because they're not there for us. So again, here's a little theoretical question that we have here. Should we put a price on nature? And the way that nature is, should we put a price on it? So I won't go through this. This is just a little theoretical question. This is not something you'll be assessed on. This is just something like a theory of knowledge that I want you to think about. So if we put a price on nature, it gives an actual value that people can understand. So people know how much something costs, and they have a point of comparison. So if we said like the Amazon rainforest is worth something like $10 billion, people know that that's how much value we put onto the ecosystem there. But putting the price on something could encourage it then, so a big corporation to come through and say, well, I actually want that area and I'm going to buy it. If it's worth this much money, I'll offer you that. There you go, let's have it. Let's buy it. So even though we'll be putting a high price on something and making people realize its value and understand its importance, there's going to be this issue of, well, maybe someone won't value that because that much money doesn't mean much to them, but that space is more important. Then we're going to have certain areas that are worth more, certain areas that are worth less, and we're saying, is this area really worth less than this place? It's going to make a very complicated issue. So something to think about. There is no right or wrong answer there, but should we put a price on nature? A little bit of facts on life. So talking about biodiversity here. So scientists agree that there is 8.7 million species on Earth, give or take roughly 1.3 million species. Of those 8.7 million, 3/4 of them are on land. 14% of those land species have been identified, and 9% of the aquatic species have been identified. The rest we have not found. We do not know where they are. We do not know what they are, but we know they are out there. We know that 50 to 90% of these species are in tropical rainforests, and that more than half of those 8.7 million are invertebrate, which means they don't have backbones or skeletons. Okay. So some interesting points of what actual biodiversity is and what life actually is. So what is species diversity? Now let's get into those terms, species diversity, etc. So what is species diversity? Species diversity is the number of different species in an area while taking into account the richness and evenness of species. So those two terms there, richness and evenness of species. We need to go a little bit deeper into those. So richness measures how many different species are in an area. So the more variety and the more number of different species that are there, the richer the environment. Whereas evenness looks at how many of each species is in the area. How abundant or scarce is each species? Why is this important? Why is species diversity important? Well, species diversity is the result of millions of years of evolution. When we have species diversity, it gives us a balanced ecosystem. It allows organisms to interact with each other and survive if there's changes. The loss of just one species can affect many other species in the ecosystem. The more species they are, the less chance that's going to have a large impact on the entire ecosystem. An example of some that do, though, for example, bees and birds. Bees and birds, if bees are removed, bees and birds pollinate over 90% of all plants. If they're removed, who pollinates those plants? It's really important. And with them gone and bees removed, all of a sudden, an entire ecosystem could collapse. Multiple ecosystems could collapse. So species diversity is really important. We need to have each different type of species there in ordering us to survive and continue. Genetic diversity. What is genetic diversity? Well, genetic diversity is the variation of genes within the genetic pool of a population. So the higher the genetic diversity, the more resistant that species is to change. With high levels of genetic diversity, there's a high chance there'll be some individuals in that population that are more suited to an environmental change, which means that species can continue when that change occurs, and that species will continue to thrive and continue on with any changes that happen to the ecosystem. Again, there is a little bit of a video here that I can't play on this video. It's called Genes and Biodiversities. That's by the California Academy of Science. Again, I will link that below so that you can watch that outside of this video. Don't need to take notes, but again, important to watch. So here's an essential question. A really essential question of what we're looking at. So if a species has a global distribution, does it matter if they go extinct locally? So again, this is not something that may perfectly be assessed on. This is something I want you to really think about. So if a species has a global distribution, so again, think of bees. Bees are all over the world. Okay. Does it matter if they go extinct locally? If bees are removed from Adelaide, does that matter? Okay. Have a think about that question. Going back to genetic diversity again, after our central question, why is genetic diversity important? Well, genetic diversity is important because it's more resilient. Well, with genetic diversity, our environments are more resilient to environmental change. With low genetic diversity, we have inbreeding, which causes genetic flaws or disabilities. Extinction is more likely if there's low genetic diversity, and once lost, genetic diversity is almost impossible to regain. The last one we need to look at, and the last slide for this video, is habitat diversity. This is the range of habitats in an area, so how many habitats there are. High habitat diversity gives different areas for population to spread into, so different populations can move into different areas. By separating those populations, we increase the amount of genetic diversity, which is good. It gives a wider range of spaces for animals to adapt to. So that's the three things for biodiversity. We'll look at habitat, species, and genetic. We've looked at some essential questions. There'll be some videos below to watch just for some additional information. And that's it for diversity, and we'll continue next lesson. All right, have a great day, guys.